Introducing POCO's latest entry into the entry-ish mid-range smartphone, and it seems like POCO is really sprinkling their magic into more segments of the smartphone market right here. But just how good is the POCO M3? So let's take a look. At first glance, the most obvious thing that we have here is the design. Whenever I saw the POCO M3 for the first time, the reaction was, wow, it looks very beautiful. This phone is really unique in terms of design. It also has that faux leather back here. It's plastic back, but it just has that leather texture there. However, one thing I felt a bit off is how deep the texture actually goes, so I'm not sure how it will last, especially when grime starts to accumulate between the gaps of these bumps in the leather texture. And then there's also a humongous cutout at the top here, which is why it reminds people of the OnePlus 8T Cyberpunk 2077 edition. But for the POCO M3 here, it's made entirely out of plastic. And there's also a very big POCO branding on this part here. But unfortunately though, this POCO branding here is pad printed. What this means is that it is printed on top of the plastic piece here, and you can actually feel it with your fingertips. With that said, you can actually scrape off the printing if you are taking it in or out of your pocket, which means that this thing won't last forever unless you put it in a case. And within this big cutout here, 1/3 of it is actually the real camera cutout. And we have a total of 3 different cameras here, the main 48 megapixel f1.8, another depth sensor, and then another macro camera there. So far, the pictures coming out of it is actually okay. And especially for the price, right, this phone is really cheap. And I would say the POCO M3's camera is a bit aggressive in terms of the white balance, and the overall exposure is a bit dark for my liking, but overall picture quality is okay. The POCO M3 is also a rather thick phone, and that's for a good reason because it packs a 6000 mAh battery, and throughout our battery life test, it's kind of impossible to drain it down. It lasts for 21.5 hours. That's just insane. And what's more insane here is actually the charging time. So the POCO M3 comes with a 22.5 watt charger. Is it 22.5? Yes, it is. But the phone only takes in 18 watts max. And throughout our battery charging benchmark though, it takes more than 1.5 hours to charge from 15 to 100%. So yeah, big battery means slower charging time even though you technically have higher wattage chargers. And as for the screen, the POCO M3 comes with a 6.53-inch IPS LCD screen with 1080p in resolution. Nothing to complain here. The colors are good, brightness is okay. And actually, I do have one thing to commend POCO is by giving a 1080p screen instead of its competitors, which are still giving us 720p screens for this price range of smartphones. And lastly, the specs and performance. For us, this specific unit here comes with a Snapdragon 662 chipset, 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. Overall performance is quite decent, but we are not going into the benchmarks for this time. So if you want to check out the gaming experience instead, check out the top right corner there. Actually, we got 2 videos, so check them out one after the other. Though one thing I want to highlight is that when we first got the POCO M3, navigating through the menu of the phone is actually quite stuttery, but since then, POCO has issued a firmware update that fixed that issue, so I tip my imaginary hat off to POCO for fixing this issue with such speed. The overall user experience is more or less the same as before because it's still using MIUI 12, so if you want to check out our usual comments about MIUI 12, check out our previous review of the POCO X3 NFC instead. So overall, I think that the POCO M3 is a fantastic smartphone, especially for this price. For the 64 gigs version, it has a starting price of 599 ringgit, which is amazing. And if you got it during the original launch sale, it is only priced at 499 ringgit. I'm not sure if they'll ever do that promotion again, but if you want to step it up to 128 gigs of storage, which is what we have here, it is only at like 699 ringgit originally. But either way, if you're paying the original RRP price, I would say it's still a fantastic deal. So yeah, that's it. That's all we have to say about the POCO M3. It's a pretty standard mid-entry level-ish range of smartphone. but it does come with quite a lot of punch in it. Oh, by the way, I also forgot that this phone comes with an IR blaster, which is personally one of my favorite features for Xiaomi and POCO phones because we can control our cameras remotely, and that's how I also took some pictures while sleeping on the bed. Yeah,